Please state your name for the record.
Andrew James Wicker.
Mr. Wicker, it's a large room. Yeah.
Okay. Andrew James Wicker.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Prestonwood Christian Academy. That's where I graduated from high school. I grew up in Prosper, Texas, a little town north of Frisco, Texas, in North Dallas.
Let me pause you for a moment.
Okay.
Can y'all hear him well enough? Okay.
No? Okay, how about this?
Thank you, much better.
All right.
Please go ahead.
My name is Andrew James Wicker. I grew up in Prosper, Texas. I grew up going to school at Prestonwood Christian Academy, which is where I graduated from high school. I then continued on to go to SMU for undergrad, and then I went on to a graduate degree at Georgetown University.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what activities you were involved in college or in while getting your master's?
In terms of my involvement in college, my first job was working for Don Huffines on his Senate campaign. And then I continued on to later be involved with founding the Young Americans for Freedom chapter at SMU, where I served as vice president. And then I helped refound the College Republicans for SMU. I ended up working with several student organizations on a 9/11 flag memorial and pro-life memorial. We had a tiff, I would say, with the administration. And so I got involved in politics in that way. And then I continued on to Georgetown and landed in DC for my graduation. And then I went to work for General Paxton.
Okay. Do you recall approximately what time or the date that you went to work for Ken Paxton?
My employment with the OAG started September of 2019.
How did you originally meet Mr. Paxton?
I had met General Paxton previously, both as my state senator, but also as the Attorney General at various Lincoln Reagan Day dinners. In terms of my employment and the opportunity to start working for him, I met him through Mark Rylander, who was a previous associate in North Texas in terms of my community. And I was recommended for the position by Mark Rylander to General Paxton. And that's whenever I met him at the Marriott Marquis in DC, and I was hired.
Okay. If Jeff Mateer was the first assistant, did Mr. Rylander have a nickname as well?
He was known commonly as the first friend.
Okay. And through that connection, you end up working at the Office of the Attorney General. In what role? What'd you do?
My title was executive aide to the Texas Attorney General, and then I was also on the campaign staff as well. And
what does an executive aide do?
My responsibilities expanded and contracted as I also had to assume scheduling responsibilities. We had 2 schedulers during my time there. Whenever we did not have a scheduler, I assumed those responsibilities, but my standard job responsibilities during whenever I was performing the functions as an executive aide was to ensure that the general was going to his schedule on time, that he was prepared for those appointments, and that he had all necessary documents and context to the discussions that he was having for that day.
That sounds like a great deal of access to the Attorney General. Is that fair?
Yes.
Approximately how much time did you spend with each other in any given day?
At least 8 hours, normally closer to probably 10.
And was that just weekdays or weekends as well?
That would include weekends.
How often was Attorney General Ken Paxton in Austin in 2020?
This was during COVID, so after probably the first 3 or 4 weeks of COVID setting in, he spent the majority of his time in Austin, starting in probably about April-May timeframe through the remainder of 2020.
And where was Senator Angela Paxton?
She regularly split her time both between their home in McKinney and in Austin.
What was your relationship with the Paxtons, individually and as a couple?
Individually, I would call General Paxton as a friend. I spent a great deal of time with him. He and I bonded over a good number of activities, such as watching football, sometimes talking politics, but just talking life. With Senator Paxton, I would say that she was nothing but loving and caring. I think she also understood that the demands of the job kept me away from my family. So in many ways, she was kind and understanding in the way that a mother would be normally. As a couple, I would say that they were incredibly welcoming and caring to me, and always inclusive.
So fair to say there's no animosity or bad blood between you and the Paxtons?
Not from me, no.
Are you part of some vast conspiracy to harm them?
No.
Are you in league with TLR or the Bushes?
No.
Are you here to tell the truth?
Yes.
I'm going to turn your attention to Nate Paul. Are you familiar with that name?
Yes.
How so?
During 2020, I was introduced to Nate Paul, and there were a number of activities and discussions that revolved around Nate Paul throughout 2020.
Can you tell me the first time you remember hearing of Nate Paul or meeting him?
The first time I remember meeting Nate Paul would have been February or March of 2020. General Paxton and I met him for lunch at Terry Black's barbecue.
Was it just the three of you?
It was.
And what was the topic of conversation?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor,
Sustained.
may I please respond? Anything from Ken Paxton is an admission by party opponent. Nate Paul is very clearly tied to a conspiracy, at least in terms of the evidence before this Senate, and Drew Wicker is available for cross-examination. None of that evidence is hearsay.
Again, Your Honor, the question she asked, she did not specify who was talking. Anything Nate Paul may or may not have said would be hearsay. Sustained.
In the course of getting to know Nate Paul and Ken Paxton as a friendship, well, let me do this differently. How are the interactions between Nate Paul and Ken Paxton?
I'm sorry, can you state this question again?
Yes, sir. What was the relationship like between Nate Paul and Ken Paxton?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. He can testify about what he saw and maybe what he heard from Ken Paxton, but that's the extent of it.
It's foundational evidence, Your Honor. He can testify to his rational perception of the facts.
Sustained.
Did you see the two of these men interact with one another?
Yes.
And what did you see in terms of their demeanor?
A cordial relationship?
Did Mr. Paxton look to be under pressure to you?
No.
Now, I'm going to turn your attention to the second time you had lunch with them. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And where was that?
That was at Polvos, downtown in Austin.
Do you recall approximately when?
This would have been May, June timeframe.
Okay. And was anybody else present for that lunch?
Ryan Bangert.
Does Mr. Bangert work for Attorney General Ken Paxton at that point?
He did.
Is he there in his personal capacity or as part of his job duties?
He was asked by the general to attend as part of his job responsibilities.
And what was the topic of that conversation?
The Many Foundation.
Did anything change in regards to what Mr. Paul wanted between the first and the second lunch?
Objection, Your Honor. This calls for hearsay again.
Your Honor, if I may, I would really appreciate it if you would look at 801 E2D specific to co-conspirator statements.
Your Honor, there's no evidence of any silly conspiracy. This is hearsay.
This entire trial has been about a conspiracy, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Who paid for lunch?
Nate Paul.
How did you perceive their demeanor and interactions with one another, hostile or friendly?
Between Nate Paul and Ken Paxton?
Yes, sir.
Friendly.
What about Ryan Bangert? How was his demeanor?
Inquisitive.
Did he seem to agree with what it is they wanted?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. We've already heard from Mr. Bangert.
That is exactly why it's relevant, Your Honor. He attacked the credibility of Mr. Bangert. So it is not only not hearsay because he's a representative working for Attorney General Ken Paxton who would have adopted a belief in or offered contrary information to. In addition to that, it's a consistent statement used to rehabilitate Ryan Bangert because of their attacks.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to belabor this, but Mr. Bangert testified. And to have this witness tell us what Mr. Bangert's attitude was about some lunch 3 or 4 years ago is just improper.
Time frame has nothing to do with exceptions to hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you. Can you please tell me what Ryan Bangert was saying in response to this conversation?
Okay, Your Honor, now she changed the question. And
I'm entitled to do that.
Let me finish my objection, please. Now instead of the witness answering the last question, now she's asked a clearly hearsay question.
I went more specifically at it after the court's ruling, which I'm entitled to do.
She cannot ask this witness what Ryan Bangert said. She just can't do that, and that's what she just did.
Sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to turn your attention to the third lunch involving Nate Paul and Ken Paxton. Can you tell me when that was?
This would have been June, July timeframe.
Of 2020?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was present at that lunch?
General Paxton, myself, and Nate Paul.
What was the topic of conversation for this lunch?
The FBI raid on Nate Paul's home and office.
Specifically, access to the affidavit underlying that search warrant?
Objection leading. And again, Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but she's asking about what Nate Paul said at a lunch. That's improper, and that would be hearsay.
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may approach.